Hello, welcome to episode
Hello.
103 of Partners in Crime, we hope.
Yay!
It's taken us a little bit of technical fiddling to get here. We've had our difficulties this week, haven't we, Bob?
You could say that, yes. The computer says no.
Yes,
But,
it has been doing so, yeah. Hopefully, we've
luckily,
ironed out...
you are at the helm of the Starship Enterprise, and we're now flying at warp factor 8 with no impediments whatsoever.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah. We did have a few small impediments last week. The sound was a little bit off, apparently. It made it through fine in the podcast. We had our man do some tweaking on that, but apparently the video in the Patreon group, I was a little on the quiet side. I'm hoping that will have sorted itself out now. I've got something
that never happens in real life, of course.
Doesn't, no, it doesn't. But I'm going to speak up as well, just in case. But it should be equalising.
Okay.
Also, you might notice if you're watching the video in the Patreon group that we've gone for a little different layout this week as well. We've jazzed it up with some funky graphics, which makes us look a little bit different and hopefully slightly more professional. And we did have a couple of people who mentioned that the last couple of weeks I've been back to front, apparently, which was apparent by looking at the books on the bookshelf behind me and seeing that all the writing was backwards. Somehow the camera had flipped itself horizontally.
This is the detail our listeners and viewers go into. A back to front Adam
they do.
Croft.
Yeah, I was in mirror image, but unfortunately I couldn't work out how to change the settings on the camera. So what I did is I actually demolished the studio and rebuilt it back to front. And also peeled off my skin and turned that inside out and put that back on as well. So hopefully that will actually get round those issues.
It's a great improvement, I have to say. So well done.
The tan's on the inside now, though. That's the only problem. So how have you been this week? Are you feeling better after your dose of the COVIDs?
Yeah, well, yes, sort of. I mean, it does linger in the form of fatigue and certain and lethargy. So, but I've been told that's to be expected. So I'm feeling a lot better. I'm over the main things. I'm a slight little cough, but that's got nothing more to do with hay fever now than anything vaguely virusy. But it's, as I said last week, I've had a mild dose, but it's absolutely flattened me. So it's a very powerful thing, and obviously is wreaking havoc throughout the world now, tragically. But there you are. I'm feeling a bit better. I'm surrounded by people, thank goodness, that are feeling better. So upwards and onwards, I hope. We'll see what happens next.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. I do hear it is something that kind of hangs around as well for a while. So it's interesting to have our own little partners in crime coronavirus case study, isn't it?
Well, I suppose,
what we're all going to be in for sooner or later.
Here I am on the Petri dish. But I really don't understand. I mean, I have to say, the Prime Minister's going back to work 2 weeks ago. It was in intensive care. Yeah. I can't begin to fathom how that's worked out because, I wouldn't like to be going in to do a job of any great responsibility. Not in any way to downgrade this podcast, but I wouldn't like to be going out and going on stage and remembering lines or being on a film set or whatever. Well, not for a little while yet.
Or working on an ICU ward.
Yeah, so I mean, he's obviously made of sterling stuff, and quite frankly, the way things have gone, he's going to have to be. But there we are. We wish him well, even if things haven't quite gone to plan. One feels, but there we are. We've got to stick together and fight on.
Yeah. I mean, without getting too political, he has been back for a day and a half, and has now had a baby. So presumably we'll be having some form of paternity leave as well. So I can tell by the look on your face you haven't seen that news.
Oh well, God! I mean, all the
stressful
things. That's a joyous, stressful thing at least. But
everything all comes together, I suppose, doesn't it?
Well, I guess so. That's what we hope. And that's what we hope when we enjoy reading a good crime novel or crime thriller or something, he said, segueing into the...
Yes.
Well, very unsubtly as ever. Have you been reading or watching anything of any interest
Not really. No. I have been doing some news roundup stuff. Or I say I have. Moriarty's been looking at the news for me. And one thing that was spotted, and something we do want to give a shout out to while we're talking about podcasts, is the Tartan Noir Show, which is a new podcast presented by Theresa Talbot, who's a BBC Radio Scotland favourite and a writer herself. She's got a new podcast from Scotland's podcast network, The Big Light, called The Tartan Noir Show, in which she interviews, grills, speaks to famous Scottish crime writers. So Val McDermid, Chris Brookmyre, Denise Mina have all been on the show. So we wanted to give a bit of a shout out to that. Teresa is joined each week by a special guest, and there are previews and news on reviews on new releases. And the podcast is in collaboration with the literary festivals Bloody Scotland and I Write,
which is a great festival. I've never had the good fortune to get along there, but I understand from everyone who has been and is a part of it. It's a great thing. So a podcast, that's fantastic. And it sounds like I'm going to listen. I'm going to tune in and enjoy, and promise not to nick anything.
I was going to say, what sort of Wally would tune into a crime fiction podcast? What a strange thing to be doing. So yeah, there've been a few little bits and bobs knocking around in the news this week that I'm going to cover. We'll also say at the moment as well, anything we talk about books wise, you can get from our very kind sponsors, Kobo. You don't need an e-reader or a particular device. You can use your phone or tablet or whatever you're listening to this show on, quite frankly. If you head over to kobo.com and if you use the promo code CRIME at the checkout, you can see at the bottom of your screen there now if you're watching on Patreon. More on that in a minute. Use the promo code CRIME at the checkout and they'll give you 90% off of your first purchase with Kobo. And if you're an existing customer, you can use the promo code PARTNERS and they'll give you 40% off. Use the link in the show notes for that. And I'll get all these things out of the way early on so we can get on with the show proper. If you are a Patreon member, of course, you can watch us in full HD doing our thing. And if you're not a Patreon member, and if you would like to help support the show and get access to lots of benefits, such as getting the podcast early, being able to watch it, as well as just listen to it, you get the free book of the month, which I'll get onto in just a second, and all sorts of bits and bobs extra. You can check that out at patreon.com/Partners in Crime podcast, and the link is in the show notes there as well. The free book of the month, we are actually, scrap that. I'll get onto that. I'll put a note in Patreon page about that because I've just realised that when this goes out, it will be May. We're right at the end of April now, aren't we? We're recording this on the Wednesday. When it goes out on the Friday, it will be May. So the book of the month will be different, and we will put a notice about that in the Patreon group on Friday, announcing what that is, how you can get that. So we'll just gloss over that and pretend I didn't say it. In slightly less positive news, to say the least, this week we had the news that Sheila Quigley had died at the age of 72. A very talented crime writer who had best-selling novels such as Bad Moon Rising, Living on a Prayer, Every Breath You Take, and her latest release in 2011, Stand By Me. You can probably spot a bit of a theme there with her book titles. But her debut novel, Run for Home, was released in 2003. That's when she rose to prominence, securing a £300,000 book deal with Random House with her debut novel. How about that? Times have changed now. You wouldn't get that now. She was a former factory machinist who, with that, went on to become one of the country's best-loved crime writers. And her friend and fellow author Charlie Pearson told the Sunderland Echo, Sheila really was a pioneer. When she first began writing, there wasn't many crime fiction novels set in the Northeast, let alone with a female protagonist. So, yeah, greatly missed there, Sheila Quigley. Bob, you have been doing some reading this week, I understand.
I have. I've been doing some reading and I've been doing some viewing. But the first thing is, of course, it's an important week for birthdays. And Ian Rankin's birthday was this week.
You just saying that because it's your birthday this week?
No, I wouldn't mention such a thing. Can you actually get my sort of address for presents running underneath this, please?
Well, I can do. I won't write the real one, but I can do. That is how. Yeah.
You can do all that, can you? Well, it was Ian Rankin's birthday this week. The great man himself. Lovely pictures of him on social media, having a birthday pint outside. I think it was the Oxford Arms or something in Edinburgh. So drew me to his book, first published 30 years ago, which has just been republished, and it's called West Wind, a classic thriller. And I'll read you a little bit about the synopsis here, because it actually sort of ties up quite nicely with a television recommendation that I'm going to make in a little bit. West Wind, the classic lost thriller from the iconic #1 bestseller. It always starts with a small lie. That's how you stop noticing the bigger ones. After his friend suspects something strange going on at the launch facility where they both work and then goes missing, Martin Hepton doesn't believe the official line of long-term sick leave. Refusing to stop asking questions, he leaves his old life behind, aware that someone is shadowing his every move. The only hope he has is his ex-girlfriend, Jill Watson, the only journalist who will believe his story. But neither of them can believe the puzzle they're piecing together, or just how shocking the secret is that everybody wants to stay hidden. Well, great reviews for this book when it came out. Rankin is a master storyteller. We know that. Great fiction, full stop. That's the Times. Ian Rankin is a genius, says Lee Child. And let's face it, he should know. One of Britain's leading novelists in any genre, the New Statesman. And it goes on and on and on. I am a quarter of the way through it. It's fantastic, as you'd imagine. And considering that it's vintage Rankin, no rebus inside. It's a fascinating read to see him writing in a different context. So first of all, from Partners in Crime, I'm sure I speak for you on this. Happy birthday, Ian! All the very best, and anyone who wants to read a cracking thriller by the great man himself, that's West Wind, which for listeners of this is of course available on Kobo.
I've just realised what you were doing when you were looking to the side. It's only occurred to me that you were kind of faux looking at me.
Yeah, I'm actually
we kind of look at each other, I suppose, can't we?
I'm looking at a closed door.
So
round closed door.
I thought somebody kept walking in.
It's not dissimilar.
That's why you're looking over.
Yeah. Hi.
You can tell we're still new to video, can't you?
Yeah, well, yes, I thought I'd try that on. Just
a little bit of Ant Dec. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, because we are back to front, naturally, you're this side of my screen. Yeah. But I have to look that side to actually get the look in. So it's a little bit discombobulating, but there we are.
Have you never done any telly before, Bob? Right, we were talking about West Wind, and I found actually you're talking about the nostalgia and the vintage Rankin. Have a little look at this. If you're watching on the video, you can see one of the original covers there of West Wind. To describe it to those of you who aren't watching will be difficult. It is vintage, to say the least. We'll see if we can get that. On. Yeah, we'll get Moriarty to pop that up on our social media channels. That old cover of West Wind, and of course now that is the modern 2020 look, which is much better. So yes, vintage Rankin. Go and check that out. You can probably do so on Kobo, I'm sure. If there are some other books you're looking to read while you're in lockdown, or just wanting to read, then MS Magazine came up with a list of suspense, mystery and thriller must-read books by women writers of colour to read in 2020. If you're wanting something a bit different, perhaps some authors you've not heard of who have been underrepresented, the list, which was compiled by Jennifer Hillier, is Untamed Shore by Sylvia Marina Garcia, which is set in Baja California in Mexico in 1979. Egg Drop Dead by Vivian Xian, the fifth book in her delightful Cleveland set Noodle Shop mystery series, which sounds pretty cozy. Apparently it's described as a cozy mystery paired with dim sum, which It sounds ideal to me. Sheena Kamal's Fight Like a Girl. Even though she's an award-winning thriller writer, this is actually her first YA novel, young adult fiction set in Toronto. The Eighth Girl by Maxine Mei Fung Chung, which is a debut thriller by the psychoanalytic psychotherapist Chung, which is about a character called Alexa Wu, who has multiple personalities. A Deadly Inside Scoop by Abby Collette, the first book in her new Ice Cream Parlor mystery series. Again, sounds pretty cozy and food related. Tracy Clark's What You Don't See, the third book in her Chicago mystery series. Again, sounds very tasty. This one, Opium and Absinthe by Lydia Kang, which is set in New York City in 1899. Rachel Housel Hall's And Now She's Gone, which is a cat and mouse thriller about a rookie private investigator hunting for Isabel Lincoln, who may or may not be missing. Probably not much point in looking for her if she's not. Tori Eldridge's The Ninja's Blade, the second thriller in the Lily Wong series, and The Cipher by Isabella Maldonado, who is a retired police captain, former commander of special investigations and forensics. So certainly knows what she's talking about, who's known for writing strong female leads, and that's the first book in her new series. So
what was that one again? I missed that. What was that last one?
That was The Cipher by Isabella Maldonado.
Sounds right. So yeah, that's
a great selection of books to check out there. Then, of course, for celebration this week, actually, I mean, in a strange sort of way, because Dame Ngaio Marsh would have been 125 years old last week. In fact, she was born in 1895, and the Star in Christchurch and RNZ as well, news sources over there, have put together 10 fascinating facts about the Kiwi crime writer, artist and theatre director. Would you like to hear them, Bob?
Yes.
I mean, say yes, because we're only 17 minutes into the episode.
Yes,
We're barely over halfway through.
I'd love to. we love our New Zealand crime writing, and she is the grand lady of crime worldwide, but in particular, of course, in New Zealand. So, come on, lay some facts on me.
Well, you can visit her beloved home in Kashmir in Christchurch, where she lived for 76 years. It's where her most famous works were created. It's full of treasures and antiques that she collected from around the world, and some of her own paintings even hang on the walls, and you can still go and tour that house today. Ngaio Marsh was one of the 4 original queens of crime, the female writers who dominated crime fiction in the 20s and 30s, including Agatha Christie, Marjorie Allingham, and Dorothy L. Sayers. She moved to England in 1928, one of her many travelling stints, and she made a living by working in the theatre as a travel writer, as an interior designer, and even opened her own interior decorating business in Knightsbridge, which I didn't know about. In 1931, she began writing novels. So at that point, she was she's 36 years old. She created Detective Inspector Roderick Alleyn, the very English chief detective inspector. She wanted to be a professional painter originally. She spent 6 years studying at Canterbury College School of Art, using her painting knowledge for her novel Artists in Crime. She produced acclaimed productions of Shakespeare plays, apparently, as well. And in the 50s, she was involved with the influential New Zealand Players, and the 430-seat Ngaio Marsh Theatre at the University of Canterbury is named in her honour. She commissioned New Zealand composer Douglas Lilburn to write music for some of her theatre productions, including Hamlet and Othello, which you can still hear, as well as her talking about them in the documentary Douglas, Landscape of a New Zealand Composer, episode 2, apparently. Fact number 9, only 4 of her novels were set in New Zealand: Vintage Murder and Colour Scheme, as well as Dyed in the Wool and Photo Finish, which the first 2 set in the North Island, second 2 in the South Island. And the 10th, quite interesting and quite nice to finish on, fact about Ngaio Marsh is that she was named after a fast-growing flowering shrub, which is that the Ngaio bush, the Maori would rub the leaves of the bush over their skin to repel mosquitoes and sandflies. How about that?
Well, do you know what? I feel a lot closer to that great writer now. I mean, what a life! I mean, she was an extraordinary woman, a Renaissance woman. I mean, to be able to do all these things, to act, to produce, to write, to direct, but she just did absolutely everything. So a great lady. But I didn't know about that. She was named after a mosquito threatening shrub.
Well, this is it. You see, you know, on Partners in Crime, we don't just talk about crime fiction. You also get some top tips on which bush to rub on yourself to repel mosquitoes. We do all sorts. We cover all angles. One thing that jumped out at me actually was 1928. She first moved to England, which is extraordinary when you think about it. Going from New Zealand to London in 1928. That was an absolutely extraordinary journey to make in the days before, commercial air travel and what have you. I mean, getting to New Zealand now is trouble.
It used to be the way. I've just read two wonderful books by the theatre director Michael Blakemore, and he's an Australian. And he came to the UK in the late 40s, so 20 years after No Marsh. And it was very much from the other side of our extraordinary planet. It was very much a thing that sort of a tradition. If you come and visit the UK and travel around Europe, and I dare say it is still to some degree when this virus world disappears and what have you. So it's always been a tradition. Certainly for people in the arts to make their way, they would come to the UK. Don't necessarily need to do it now because the artistic scene is so vibrant in both New Zealand and Australia. But I think that was a big thing.
I mean, it's a lot easier now with Qantas knocking about and not having to spend a month on a boat. That is more my kind of.
Michael Blakemore had to work his passage on the boat. He had to. That was the only way he could get across to the UK in 1948, I think it was. So I'm sure No Marsh travelled in a little more comfort than that. But that's so she was. And then how did she spend in the UK? I wonder. That's a question I don't know.
I don't know.
She went back.
I've got to admit I'm not too knowledgeable on her life. It mentioned that there were a few stints, I think. So
I'm sure. Oh well, fascinating. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, I'm going to mention something now. I'm absolutely hooked on this new television series.
Go for it.
And there are a couple of really good ones this week that I've come across. Again, old news to other people. It's called Devs, DEVS. Is it a crime thriller? Yeah, it is. There's a murder at the heart of it. There's a sort of investigation, and there's all sorts of other intrigue. But it is the new production by the extraordinary Alex Garland. Most people will know Alex Garland, the writer of The Beach, and Annihilation is one of his latest creations on television, which is an extraordinary work, and so is this. Now, I've been looking through certain reviews to see what people are thinking, and of course the terrific Lucy Mangan in The Guardian always comes up with particularly good observations. That's why she's such a good critic. But anyway, she says this: you know how it is. 1 minute you're happily cracking the problem of how to predict nematoid worm behavior. The next minute, you're being whisked off to the ultra-secret lair of your billionaire employer's quantum computing firm and being shown technological possibilities so destabilizing to everything on which you and humanity depend for life and sanity that you have to rush to the nearest futuristically designed loo as all your organs rebel. We've all been there. And now, so has the brilliant Russian coder Sergei in Devs on BBC Two. You'll be able to get it on Catch Up, iPlayer, whatever. Please do. I can't recommend it enough. He is an artificial intelligence specialist working for Amaya, a fictional amalgamation of all the tech companies whose overt and covert tentacular reach currently control our lives to a degree that would terrify us if we could bear to think about it. After his nematodal success, he is recruited by the company's enigmatic, all-powerful founder and CEO, Forrest. played by Nick Offerman. Anyone who likes Park and Recreations, I certainly do, will know his work. A fantastic actor. Sir Guy is a touch apprehensive about the move, but his girlfriend Lily is delighted for him. Sir Guy's attitude turns out to be the wiser one. And I won't actually do any spoilers on that, but Lucy Mangan goes on to say, it's a deep, dark, wild ride. How much of it deals in pure imagination and how much of it is grounded in stuff already here, I don't know. And please, nobody tell me it's better this way. Let the quarks take me when it's time. It's great. It's futuristic. There's some moments which are absolutely breathtaking. In it. The design of this television program, I'm sure, will win awards in its own right, because it is quite spectacular. And again, why am I recommending on a crime thriller podcast? It's because there is crime being committed, not only physically, but also mentally and in cyberspace and various other things. So it's something very different from your ordinary sort of police procedural or your psychological thriller. I think it's absolutely terrific. I don't know where it's going. I'm only on episode 5. But please watch it. As I say, it's been on BBC Two. You'll be able to catch it worldwide on the BBC iPlayer if you have that august platform. Don't miss it.
And at some point, probably on BritBox, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure of that, yeah.
Lovely. Anne Cleves has been speaking to The Dispatch magazine in India, which I, of course, read every week from cover to cover.
You do, but that's only if you're looking for so you look through the small ads, and I think you sell your books, don't you? You've got a little advert in the back. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, just flick through the classifieds in case I want to nip over to Mumbai to buy a leaf blower.
Again.
In this week's or last week's on their website, they carried an article from Churdeep Malhotra, who connected with Anne Cleves to speak about The Long Call, her newest book. And it's very interesting. If you look up the article, she spoke about having been the teacher's daughter when she was young. She sometimes found it hard to fit in, and she felt that meant she became an observer rather than a participant, which she thinks has helped with the creation of characters and writing. She named Dorothy L. Sayers and Ngaio Marsh as early formative influences on her writing. And she quite interestingly said, crime fiction is a flexible genre. She says, I find I can say everything I want within the structure of the traditional story. For example, The Long Call explores the lives of adults with a learning disability and the sense of entitlement among a group of powerful men. I've never been very good at plotting, and in my kind of crime fiction, the plot almost takes care of itself. So again, there, what we said quite a lot of the time, that you can make these kind of societal comments, and not political, but you can get quite a lot from crime fiction, which is not just the solving of the mystery and the pulp fiction side of things.
Oh no, many different layers. I mean, you take a look at Devs, which I've just been talking about, and you can see in its heritage. Anyone who loves one of my favourite books, I wasn't quite so keen on the film adaptation, but The Circle by Dave Eggers. Similar sort of feel, but you do take in an awful lot of information, and you do in every time. The point you're making is true, and whatever you're reading, if it's well researched and takes you into a world which you may not be au fait with in particular, you do pick up an awful lot of information. Some of it more interesting than others, I suppose. Certainly from the world of forensics, if you read a Val McDermid or anything like that, you'll pick up an awful lot of things that perhaps you didn't know before. So
she said she always starts with the place as well, which I find fascinating. I think is obviously quite clear as well if you've read or watched Shetland or Vera or anything that Anne Cleves
Vera's on now with the superlative Brenda Blethyn, and it's and that's terrific, and goes from doesn't go from strength to strength. It was always strong, but it's still with us, and I think it's going to another series next year, which is great. But that's just another part of Anne's empire.
Yeah, and it just goes to show really how she always kind of starts with the places she says, and place really and location is a character very much so in her books. She says it helps root her and helps the characters to develop. And her new book set in North Devon, which was somewhere she grew up, where she claims she became more confident, clearer about who she was, because they moved there when she was 11 and she started in secondary school there. And she finished off by naming 5 crime writers that she admires, who interestingly were all foreign crime writers that were translated into English. So again, maybe this fascination with location as a character again is a thing. She named her 5 as Georges Simenon's Maigret books, favourites of yours, Bob.
Yeah.
Fred Vargas, Henning Mankel's Wallander, Andrea Cameri's Montalbano, favourites of mine.
Yes.
And Ragnar Jonassen, who is a much newer crime writer coming out of Iceland. So, all very interesting stuff there. And great writers all. So, I mean, God, we're spoilt for choice, aren't we? In the crime fiction world. So we're very, very fortunate. Which reminds me, there's a great new program that's just started. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it on Arsenic and Old Lace. But Adrian Dunbar, the wonderful Adrian Dunbar of Line of Duty and so many other things, has got the second series of his show Blood, which is on Channel 5, which is interesting, but working, and it's got rave reviews. And they're obviously doing an awful lot more drama than they normally do, and may they continue to do it. I'll mention that a little more on that in the next segment. That's Superintendent Hastings to you, sir.
Oh, is it Superintendent?
Isn't it? Adrian Dunbar's Hastings, wasn't he?
Magnetic. I mean, I think he's just brilliant. I can remember. I mean, I've known Adrian for decades now, but I can remember going to, when I was at RADA, going to see some friends of mine who were studying acting at the Guildhall in the Barbican. I went to see several productions, and Adrian was in all of them. And even at that stage, you know, he was standout. He was just a terrific actor, and again is happily still doing great work. So there we are. That's Blood. Yeah, so good title, isn't it? You can't forget that.
As you were talking there, I did have my finger hovering over the name drop alert that I've set up while we're doing the video. I didn't actually go for it, but that was going to be the first time I was going to use it.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Let me think. Who else can I? I can remember when I was working with Frank Sinatra back. Oh,
there we go.
Yeah, great.
I'm going to get an audio-based one as well for next week that I can put in, so that can be heard on the regular podcast too. Yes, we are going to go off now and do Arsenic and Old Lace. It is, if you're new to Partners in Crime, that is our after-show show, our bonus show for our patrons. If you're interested, then head over to patreon.com/crime fiction podcast, or check out the links in the show notes. You can get far more stuff and help support the show as well. Thank you to Kate Inglesant and Nikki de Villiers, who have done so this week, who have joined our growing loyal band of patrons. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you both.
And hello, now that you can see us. Right, we're going to go and do Arsenic and Old Lace. I might grab myself a coffee in the middle. But until then, next week, Bob, going to be episode 104. Can you believe that? Same as your age, wasn't it? This time next week.
Well, it's what I felt like for the last few weeks. I can tell you.
True.
It's 104. Well done, man. That's quite something, isn't it?
It is quite something indeed. Yes, yeah. It's didn't think we would get there. I didn't think we'd get to about 5, quite honestly. But there we go.
Well, for better or worse, here we are, and let's face it. Here we go. Bye-bye.
Oh, hang on. You got to wait for me to get the theme tune ready first in front of me.
Oh, you see, it's not quite as well oiled as you'd imagine.
No. Here we go. Let's try again.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Daws and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.